In the heart of Shenzhen, a 32-story apartment complex goes dark after sunset, not from a power outage, but because the people who live there are gone. One unit still has a handwritten note taped to the front door. For sale. Urgent. Any price. It's been there for 3 months. No one called. The family who owned it once had it all. The husband worked in electronics export. The wife ran a small online shop. They borrowed big to buy a 2-bedroom condo, an investment in the future. But then the orders stopped. Layoffs came. The online shop collapsed. Now they're living with parents in the countryside. The bank still deducts their mortgage every month. They didn't fail. They just couldn't outrun the system they were part of. How many more families are quietly walking away from their homes, without a sound? The first sign wasn't the foreclosure notice. It was the silence. Entire floors in new apartment towers now stand empty. In cities like Shenzhen and Dongguan, once booming with construction, developers have stopped answering calls. Property sales offices have closed, sometimes overnight. In 2025, the average second-hand home price across 100 Chinese cities dropped by 7.23% year-on-year. That marked the 36th consecutive month of decline. In Shenzhen alone, prices on some units have collapsed from 12 million yuan, around 1.65 million US dollars, to just 4 million yuan, a loss of nearly 70%. But the more devastating truth lies beneath the numbers. Even when people are willing to sell at a loss, there are no buyers. In Shanghai, over 220,000 properties are listed for resale. Agents are begging for viewings. Apartments that once sparked bidding wars now sit untouched for months, even at slashed prices. For many Chinese families, property is more than shelter. It is their savings, their retirement plan, their last shot at upward mobility. And now it's a cage. Most of these homes were purchased with bank loans, mortgages based on assumed job security in industries like manufacturing, logistics, and e-commerce. But those assumptions no longer hold. Factories across China's coastal provinces are shutting down. Export orders have vanished. Livelihoods that once seemed stable have disintegrated. The husband from our earlier story worked for a supplier shipping parts to the US. The company lost 80% of its clients after tariffs surged to 145% under revived Trump-era policies. Unable to pivot or find alternative markets, it closed operations in January. He hasn't found work since. His wife sold products through a major Chinese e-commerce platform. But with platforms like Shein and Temu hit by new US rules ending duty-free thresholds, her margins evaporated. Shipping costs surged. Customers disappeared. So did the store. Now they have no income. But the mortgage doesn't care. In theory, they could sell the apartment and start over. But the market is dead. Prices have fallen below loan value. To sell the home, they'd have to pay the bank out of pocket. So they walked away. And they're not alone. Tens of thousands are quietly exiting the cities, leaving behind homes that were never finished, or ones they can't afford to keep. The state media says the economy is recovering, but in the shadows of China's skyscrapers, the lights are going out, one apartment at a time. For decades, China's cities grew upward while its economy pointed outward. Apartments weren't bought to live in. They were bought because factories were full, because wages came on time, because exports were flowing. That model worked as long as the West kept buying. But the moment Washington pulled back, the foundation cracked. In 2025, Chinese exports to the US dropped 8.3%. Not by accident, but by design. The Trump administration's trade offensive has returned with sharper edges. Tariffs on Chinese goods now reach as high as 145%, hitting sectors like electronics, furniture, toys, and mechanical appliances, the lifeblood of China's coastal industries. But that wasn't all. Washington closed the de minimis loophole, a technical rule that once allowed billions of dollars in small-value goods to enter the US without duties. Platforms like Shein and Temu, which powered thousands of microbusinesses across China, were built on that loophole. Now they face tariffs of up to 120% with no exemptions. The result? Orders vanished. Entire supply chains went cold. And the collapse didn't stop at the factory gates. When exports stall, the damage ripples outward. Mortgage payments miss their due dates. Construction halts mid-project. Retail dies on the ground floor of empty towers. But here's the twist. Beijing knew this model was brittle. They called it a protracted war strategy, hoping to wait it out while quietly adjusting. In April 2025, China's Ministry of Commerce publicly vowed to never kneel. Yet in the same week, they lifted tariffs on over 130 U.S. product categories, including semiconductors, jet engines, and critical medical equipment. The very tools they can't manufacture alone. Outwardly defiant, inwardly desperate, officials even tried to shift production to Southeast Asia. Chinese suppliers began reaching out to partners in Vietnam and India, asking them to relabel Chinese goods as local exports to bypass U.S. tariffs. But that escape route is closing fast. India, sensing an opportunity, refused to play middleman. Instead, it offered the U.S. a more favorable trade deal, positioning itself as a replacement, not a proxy. And Vietnam? Its export capacity is maxed out. Labor costs are rising. Infrastructure is strained. Every door China once used to reroute trade is now monitored, taxed, or diplomatically shut. The model that lifted China into the world's second-largest economy, factory exports, high-leverage housing, Western consumption, no longer has a buyer. And without a buyer, the rest unravels. Mortgages become nooses, condos become tombs, and families who once believed in the China dream start packing boxes in silence. In China, collapse doesn't begin with a bang. It starts with silence. Phones stop ringing. Orders stop coming. Bills keep arriving. Then one day the gate is locked and no one comes back. In 2025, that's what's happening to tens of thousands of Chinese enterprises. Not just tiny shops or side hustles, but major property developers, billion-dollar exporters, and logistics hubs that once pulsed with 24-hour energy. Let's start with real estate. In January, Evergrande, once the largest developer in the world, was forced into liquidation in a Hong Kong court. Its offshore finance arm defaulted on billions in bonds. Projects halted mid-construction. Buyers left with rebar skeletons instead of homes. At the same time, Country Garden, another real estate giant, entered a complex debt restructuring process, struggling to survive a $190 billion liability mountain. Thousands of unfinished buildings across China now sit exposed to wind and dust. Entire neighborhoods planned for upward mobility now resemble abandoned movie sets. But the problem isn't just real estate, it's cash flow. These developers relied on pre-sales, using down payments from buyers to finance construction. That system only works when confidence is high and cash is flowing. When families lose jobs or expect property prices to fall, they stop buying. And when they stop buying, the entire chain snaps. In some cities, developers are so desperate to create the illusion of demand, they hire fake homebuyers. Actors paid 100 yuan just to line up at showrooms. At one Shenzhen project, prices dropped from 1.65 million US dollars to just over 550,000 in under 3 years. Still no takers. And when developers stop building, the ripple spreads fast. Construction companies lose contracts. Cement, steel, and tile suppliers lose buyers. Interior design firms close. Logistics trucks idle. This is a domino chain. And it's not just property. Over on the export side, factories are dying at a rate no one expected. In Dongguan, a manufacturing hub once called the workshop of the world, the bankruptcy rate among small and medium-sized factories has reached 30% in some districts. These aren't mismanaged businesses. These are long-established export-reliant firms crushed by sudden tariff hikes, disappearing U.S. orders, rising global freight costs, and Beijing's insistence on zero relocation of operations abroad. One factory owner posted online, "We had 60 containers of shoes ready for export. Now they sit in port. Nobody is buying. Customs told us, 145% duty. We can't even ship them out." Another manufacturer of cardboard packaging, a critical supply for e-commerce, reported an 80% drop in orders. And since cardboard is consumable, it's often the first signal of broader slowdown. From garments to gadgets, the entire industrial spine is cracking. Even global retailers like Walmart, after briefly pausing China orders, quietly resumed shipments, but with brutal new terms. Chinese suppliers eat more cost, with thinner margins, or risk losing contracts altogether. And China's sovereign wealth fund? It's dumping U.S. private equity holdings to reduce exposure. That's not a signal of strength. It's triage. It's preparation for impact. Meanwhile, Beijing maintains the narrative: stability, recovery, confidence. But inside corporate boardrooms, behind closed factory gates, executives are staring at spreadsheets with one question: how much longer can we keep pretending? Zhang Min didn't leave the city because he wanted to. He left because there was nothing left to stay for. For 12 years, he worked at a garment factory in Foshan, sewing collars for shirts that ended up on racks in American malls. He was fast, reliable, never missed a shift. In January, the orders stopped. By March, the factory cut shifts. By April, it shut down entirely. He was told he'd get severance. He didn't. He waited 3 weeks, then took a 12-hour bus ride back to his village in Hunan. He now delivers packages on an electric bike, making 1/5 of what he used to earn. Zhang's story isn't rare. It's typical. According to data from China's Ministry of Human Resources, over 8 million people lost their jobs in 2024. More than half of them came from export manufacturing sectors. Behind those numbers are stories like this. A young woman in Dongguan who spent 3 years in a furniture factory, now selling snacks on a sidewalk stall. A technician from Ningbo now live-streaming mobile games at night to buy groceries. A former logistics dispatcher in Chengdu who now takes on part-time janitor shifts. Cash only. This isn't adaptation. It's desperation. And it's not isolated. In cities across southern China, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Yiwu, there's a growing class of workers who are technically employed, but only in name. They drive rideshare apps, deliver food, flip live stream items on second-hand platforms. They live day-to-day, hour-to-hour, often without insurance, benefits, or contracts. China's once vibrant working class is sliding into what economists call informal survival. And the younger generation, they're stuck before they even begin. The urban youth unemployment rate hit 15.3% in 2024, according to internal estimates. The government stopped publishing this number in mid-2023, citing methodological adjustments. But the silence speaks louder. A viral video, later deleted, showed 3 college graduates in Beijing applying for warehouse picker jobs at a supermarket chain. All 3 had degrees in finance or business administration. One of them said, "I just want to feel useful again." Even those lucky enough to keep jobs aren't safe. Across multiple provinces, wage arrears have become the new normal. Construction workers, delivery drivers, even teachers in private schools are waiting months for their salaries. In some factory zones, businesses flee without notice, loading trucks overnight, disappearing by morning. Left behind, unpaid wages, utility bills, and lawsuits no one will win. The most painful part? This class, China's workers, were once the engine of its rise. They built the roads, assembled the gadgets, and powered the exports that made China the world's factory. Now, they are being squeezed from both ends. The formal job market is vanishing. The housing market is sinking, and prices rising. In 2024, China's consumer price index climbed to 3.8%, the highest in nearly a decade. Food, fuel, transport, all more expensive. Many low-income families have had to cut back on meat consumption. Some vegetables, once basic staples, are now considered luxuries. When the refrigerator is empty and job boards are silent, ambition isn't what fades first. It's dignity. So people retreat, back to villages, back to parents, back to borrowed time. And somewhere in all that movement, a generation that once carried China forward disappears. In 2024, more than 2,000 industrial disputes and protests erupted across China. That's a 40% increase year on year. From factory walkouts to highway blockades, From construction sites to delivery hubs, the unrest spread faster than any official would admit, but few outside ever heard about it. Because for every protest that erupted, censors rushed in faster. Social media posts were deleted within minutes. Accounts were banned. Live streams were cut mid-sentence. Entire forums were wiped clean of keywords like bankruptcy, wage arrears, or eviction. In the first quarter of 2025 alone, over 40 million posts were erased from Weibo, China's largest social platform. More than 2,000 independent journalist accounts were shut down or issued warnings. Boycan, the goal isn't to fix the problem, it's to erase it. So when middle-class homeowners started openly discussing mortgage defaults, their group chats disappeared. When college graduates shared screenshots of hundreds of unanswered job applications, their profiles went dark. Beijing's message is simple. If people can't see the crisis, maybe they'll stop believing it exists. But the streets say otherwise. In some cities, underground poster campaigns have reemerged. Anonymous flyers taped to subway walls reading, "No job, no house, no future. We are the invisible ones. Don't believe the recovery story." Some posters even quote a bitter news saying, "The rich kneel to foreign capital. The poor kneel to interest payments. And the rest kneel just to survive." But while Beijing tightens its grip at home, abroad, it's losing control. The hope was simple. If China could wait out US pressure, maybe Europe would break ranks. That gamble has failed. In April, China lifted sanctions on 5 members of the European Parliament, hoping to restart investment talks with the EU. But Brussels didn't take the bait. Instead, the EU launched anti-subsidy investigations into Chinese electric vehicles and solar panels, citing overcapacity and unfair state support. Eurostat reports show the EU's trade deficit with China hit a record high of 90 billion euros in 2024, and the backlash is growing. Germany and France are considering additional tariffs on Chinese products, starting in 2025. Even Ireland faced pressure from US lawmakers to cancel plans to purchase China's C919 aircraft, citing military ties and intellectual property theft. Globally, the US is moving faster than China can react. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirmed in April that America is finalizing new trade agreements with 15 to 18 key partners, including India and Mexico, to fill the gap left by Chinese suppliers. Vietnam's exports to the US rose 15% in 2024. India's jumped 12%. And for the first time, Beijing is no longer the dominant voice in its own backyard. Meanwhile, China's foreign exchange reserves fell from $3.2 trillion to $2.9 trillion in 2024, the lowest in nearly a decade. That's not just a number. That's a signal. Capital is leaving. Confidence is evaporating. And as the world reorients, China is finding itself isolated, not by force, but by design. The model no longer works. Export-driven growth is blocked. Domestic consumption is broken. Real estate is imploding. And even hope, once abundant in the cities, is fading into silence. When people stop believing the future is theirs to shape, they stop speaking at all. And perhaps that's the most dangerous silence of all. The apartment is still there. The one in Shenzhen hasn't sold. The handwritten note is fading under dust. Inside, the walls are bare. The lights don't work. But the mortgage still exists somewhere on a spreadsheet in a government office. The family is gone, but the debt remains. They didn't fail. They followed every rule. Work hard. Buy a home. Trust the future. But no one warned them that the future was tied to a single thread: exports to the West. And when that thread snapped, everything unraveled. Now, a question hangs in the silence. If a system built on growth can't survive a slowdown, what happens when the slowdown becomes permanent?